Okay.
Wally, you here?
I'm here. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
In our continuing discussions about the origins of minhagim, one of the most prevalent customs in Jewish communities is when a person gets an aliyah or does something particularly well, davens for the Amid or something like that. Very often you hear people say, Shkoyach, Yashikoach. Where does that come from? Where does this custom come of using that expression? And again, the correct expression is Yeyasher Kochacha, which is proper Hebrew for may your strength be increased. And sometimes it gets contracted into Shkoyach, which is a contraction of several words, which doesn't really mean anything. Where does it come from? So we have to go back and start with a different custom, which is universal pretty much. When we finished reading a Sefer last week, finished Sefer Shmos, in the last Aliyah, after the Parsha was finished, everybody said, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. This is the origin of this custom, as we'll see. It began, probably, I guess, very, very early, post-Talmudic period, when a person finished laning after each aliyah. The Ra'avan, in the early 12th century, quotes a custom in France, in Provence, that people would say chazak to each person who gets an aliyah after the aliyah was over. And this is based on a medrash that lo yomush sefer haTorah hazeh mipicha. And the word hazeh says Hashem was, Moshe was holding a sefer Torah, and Hashem says to him, Chazak v'yamatz. And based on that, they derive the custom when a person gets an aliyah to say Chazak v'yamatz. Our version of the medrash that we have today refers to Yoshua fixing up Sefer Dvarim when Hashem says to him, Chazak v'yamatz. But the Minhag Ashkenaz, in the early period of the Rishonim, was to say Chazak to each aliyah. Say Chazak. The Sfardim at that time would say it only after the entire Torah was completed. By the way, today, in Sephardic communities, they don't say Yasher Kochacha, they say Chazak v'yamatz, quoting the pasuk in Yoshua, Chazak v'yamatz, and the person who got the aliyah, who's a recipient of this blessing, would say Chazak u'baruch. That's the Syrian Sephardic tradition today. We simply say Yasher Kochacha, or contracted to Shkoach. It's interesting how these minhagim developed. The best line, and this is true of all minhagim, is quoted by the Orchos Chaim. And regarding this, another custom, he says, Hakol holech achar haminhag. These are not things that are engraved in stone. It's based on the minhag. The Shulchan Aruch, which is our guide, quotes the Orchos Chaim, and he says that the minhag is to say, after each aliyah, to say Chazak. And the Ramah quotes this again. After each aliyah, we say Chazak. Again, Ashkenazic custom, we don't say Chazak. We say Yasher Kochacha. Others have quote the minhag as not referring to each aliyah, but as you complete each sefer of the Torah, you would say Chazak. And even there are differences of opinions. Some say Chazak, 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 3 times. Our minhag, Chazak, Chazak, v'nis chazek. So again, there are different minhagim again, in summary, either after each aliyah or after each sefer, you say chazak. Ashkenazic minhag today is to say yasher kochacha. Most people don't understand Hebrew. Yasher koach doesn't mean anything. It's not Hebrew. It's yasher kochacha. That is the correct Hebrew way of expressing it. But again, the minhag is not to use proper Hebrew, so that's another story altogether. Rav Soloveitchik has two different understandings of this. He says that we need chizuk, we need encouragement when we daven or when we lane. And that chizuk takes place by never stopping to learn. So when we finish a masechta, for example, we start a new masechta right away after the siyum. The same way that on Simchas Torah we begin Bereshis right after we finish Dvarim, and also on a regular Shabbos. The chizuk takes place where we finish one parsha in the morning, and at mincha time we're reading the next parsha again. He says, so that's the chizuk that by continually learning, that's the chazak, that's the chizuk, in a very, very philosophical way. At another time, he gave an interesting observation in one of his shiurim. This is fascinating, and this is probably a great deal of truth into this. He says the minhag was, as we mentioned before, that Tzibor says the last pasuk of the Torah aloud when the chazan gets to the end of Zos HaBracha, and the printer in a chumash at one point, after the last words, Le'enei Kol Yisrael, the last words of Zos HaBracha, so he wrote the letters Chet, Zayin, Kuf, Chazak. What was that intended to do? It was instructions to the tzibur. It means Chazan v'Kahal. When you conclude the reading of the Torah, the Chazan and the tzibur, Chazan v'Kahal, Chazak, would repeat the words, the last pasuk, and that's where the word Chazak came from. Interesting interpretation of how that happened and how a minhag began, because somebody wrote down, again, before the printing press, somebody wrote down Chazak, which meant Chazan v'Kahal. They repeat the last pasuk, and somehow that got interpreted to simply Chazak. And this is just another example. Very, very often you have what a printer might put in becomes accepted, and people forget the original reason for it. We have many situations like that. One of the classic ones is Migdol and Magdil in benching. All week long you say Magdil, and on Shabbos you say Migdol. Why? In Shmuel Beis it's Migdol, and in Tehillim it's Magdil. Why repeat it in benching? So in an early copy of the Siddur, or when it was annotated to give the sources of the psukim, so next to the words Magdil in the benching, the copyist, the scribe, wrote down Beis Shin Beis, meaning B'Shmuel Beis, it says Migdol, Beis Shin Beis Migdol. And over the period of time, the Beis Shin Beis became B'Shabbos. And that's how the minhag became, that we say Migdol on Shabbos and Magdil during the week. All because of a scribe writing down the words Beis Shin Beis. Similarly with Chazak. But once the minhag became accepted, it's very hard to change. So I would say the following. If we're going to wish people Yasher Kochacha after they get an aliyah, or after they do something particularly well, davening for the Amud, Psicha, whatever, Glila, Hagba, whatever it might be, at least do it in grammatically correct Hebrew. So instead of saying Shkoyach, which doesn't mean anything in any language. You say, Yeyasher kochacha. Yeyasher kochacha, may your strength be increased. Or if you want to be a Sephardi, you can say, Chazaku Baruch. Chazak v'yamatz, whatever but do it in grammatically correct Hebrew. Yasher koach doesn't mean anything. Yeyasher kochacha, may your strength be increased. And shkoyach is a bastardization, if you will, of Hebrew and Yiddish thrown together, which doesn't mean anything in any language. So Yeyasher kochacha is a commendable wish for somebody that he should have mazel and his strength should increase in general. We say that to a person who gets an aliyah. We say it to a person who does something particularly well. And we also say at the end, say chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek for the tzibur itself when we conclude reading one of the svarim in Chumash. Again, some people say chazak, 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 and some people, but the universal custom has been accepted today is chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek, based on an early medrash that you showed and bring down. But really, in general, we have to be careful that any language, any expression that we use should at least be grammatically correct. Yes.
Wally.
Yeah.
However, in today's culture, whether it's grammatically correct or not, what you do today becomes almost the norm. So shkoyach really means something to people, and that's why they use it.
I know. Well, in today's culture, unfortunately, grammar has no place, and it's become the norm. You're correct. It's become the norm, and it's become acceptable. And all that I'm trying to put forth is that at least when we do these customs, we should at least do it in a grammatically correct form, even though the mistake is accepted as the norm. It just bothers me when things are not done correctly. Again, shkoyach is normally accepted throughout the world, but it's grammatically incorrect, and I am pursuing my lonely battle to get grammatically correct expressions into the discourse of the Jewish people.
The reality is, if you actually said, if someone said to someone else, Yasher kochacha or kochech, depending who you're talking to, they might look at you like, if they've never heard that, it's like, what are you saying to me?
So you explain it. That's all. I mean, I try to do this myself. Look, it's the same. Again, I may be a lonely voice in the wilderness, but in general, for example, the Hebrew language is generally the accent is on the last syllable. It's mil ra, not mil el. So the correct Hebrew would be, for example, Baruch, not Baruch. Baruch is a Yiddishization of Hebrew. In Yiddish, the emphasis is on the first syllable. Grammatically correct Hebrew, the emphasis is on the last syllable. So people who normally daven, unfortunately, they Yiddishize the Hebrew language in their davening and put the emphasis on the first syllable as opposed to the last syllable, which is grammatically correct. And I remember my very first day in a Hebrew class in Yeshiva College, the Professor Ziv, Olav Shalom, asked the class, each person, Ma Shimcha, what's your name? So he came to me, I said, Shmi Mordechai. So he says, that's not your name. You're not Mordechai. You're Mordechai. Emphasis on the last syllable, which is grammatically correct Hebrew. And I try to daven that way as much, as long as I'm aware of it, because most people daven incorrectly by emphasizing the first syllable as opposed to the last syllable. So these are little things that many people may not be conscious or aware of, but if we're doing something, you might as well do it the correct way. And that's been my campaign.
Wally?
Yes.
Except for an aliyah, can the term kol kavod and yisher kochacha, are they interchangeable?
Pretty much.
Just acknowledge him.
You're wishing a person well on something that he has done. So kol hakavod is fine, although that's not the traditional expression. It would be, as I say, it would be chazak v'yamatz or yiyasher kochacha, which became shkoyach. Yeah, go ahead.
This might not be kashur la'inyan, but you were talking about mil ela mil ra. So where does this whole thing come in with the difference between Ashkenazi and Sfaradit pronunciation when davening, where all the tavs become like a sin or samach concept, which is, quote, correct, because you're talking about, accents on syllables, but it's also pronunciations.
Okay, so if you're davening with a Sephardic pronunciation, then you would daven one way, which again, grammatically Hebrew should be on the second syllable most of the time.
Oh, I'm into the syllables. I'm just talking about the concept that I'm not used to all the Ashkenazic pronunciation. Like I say Beit Knesset, not Beis Knesses. And so I'm just wondering in terms of that, not the accent on the syllable, but just more changing the tav to sound not like a T as in Thomas, but like as an S as in Sam.
Yeah, okay. Well, so there are a number of issues that you're raising here. Many people who daven or pronounce Hebrew in a Sephardic way don't necessarily pronounce it in a grammatically correct Havara Sfardit.
Sure.
So that's number one. They do it for maybe because in schools they're taught by Israeli teachers, and Israelis are notorious for not knowing grammar. So they may teach the pronunciation with a Sephardic pronunciation, but it may not be a grammatically correct Sephardic pronunciation, which is a separate issue. Most Israelis speak Hebrew the way most Americans speak English, which is to say grammatically incorrect. If you're davening, whatever pronunciation you're using, whether it's Sephardic or Ashkenazic, it should still be on the last syllable because the Hebrew language is constructed that way. That's all I can say. I will say, just as a footnote, and this is something that many people have argued about over the years. What is the correct pronunciation of Hebrew, Sephardic or Ashkenazic, so forth? The Ashkenazic pronunciation is Babylonian-based through Spain, and that's where that comes from. The Ashkenazic pronunciation, if I want to go backwards, from Eastern Europe through France and Germany to Italy, backwards to Israel. It is my contention, as well as a very few others, that the Hebrew that was spoken in the time of the Beis Hamikdash was probably what we call today the Ashkenazic pronunciation. Because the Jews, after the destruction of the temple, the Jews, Bayis Rishon, they went to Babylonia. But Bayis Sheni, when the second temple was destroyed, most of the Jews were exiled to Italy, where the Jewish community there redeemed the Pidyon Shvuyim and didn't want to make them slaves in Rome as much as possible. And from Italy, they migrated northward to Germany, France, and the rest of Ashkenazi communities. So it's quite possible that the Ashkenazic pronunciation was the way Hebrew was spoken in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. That would be my theory, as well as a few others. Most people don't ascribe to that theory, but I think it's important to understand migration patterns in order to understand how Hebrew developed and how it was spoken. But in either event, the regional dialects of each country affected how, I mean, you have people today in the Hasidic community, their pronunciation of Hebrew, Burich as opposed to Baruch, is totally different from what normal people consider to be Hebrew. It's a different language almost. These are regional dialects. But in any dialect, if you're talking about grammatically correct pronunciation, it should be on the second syllable. It's a campaign that I'm waging alone. Very few people subscribe to that, because what people do becomes the norm, not what they should be doing. So in either event, at least we know what the correct pronunciation should be, what the correct expression should be. So next time you get an aliyah or daven for the Amud or get a Hagba, whatever it might be, some people should wish you Yeyasher Kochacha or Chazak V'yamatz. Other than that, the customs will have a life of their own, and people will still say Shkoyach. And I don't think I'll be able to change that.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
Keep trying, Wally.
Okay.
Wally,
Exactly.
shkoyach, Wally, shkoyach.
Ah,
Have a good day, everybody.
Go tough. Bye-bye.
Thank you.